just like that, we're on the other side. Cool. Well, welcome, everybody. I know we've got some folks still filing in and some very familiar faces already that I could see in the audience. Hey, Becky, good to see you here. I've got to make my way back up to Chicago and Indy to see you again soon. But we will let everybody get situated and then we'll get moving. As always, if this is your first Shops Talk and joining one of our webinars, you're in for a treat. We got some rock star guests here already. But please, please, please be interactive. Light up the chat. Please ask questions. The premise of this is always to give back as much as we can to our community, especially having great ops folks here who are going to be able to share their story of jumping from rookie to all-star status. But we're always here to give back. So if there's any questions, thoughts, please toss them in the chat. That's exactly what we're here for. With all that being said, we've got a pretty big group of folks already. So we're going to get things moving. Again, welcome everybody. Excited to have everybody here. Big thank you to Shawn, Kara, and Stephanie for all taking a few minutes out of their day to share some wealth of knowledge with us and our greater community. Of course, we'll have this all recorded and be able to share it out later for everybody to be able to see. But biggest thank you to all of you for jumping in and hanging out with us today. I'm going to go around the horn real quick. Stephanie, I'm going to start with you to give a quick introduction, a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, and I always try to make it something unique and interesting. So we're going to go with like favorite food today. So who you are, where you're calling from, what you're doing professionally, and then of course, what is your favorite food of choice? So Stephanie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. I am Stephanie Armand. I am head of RevOps over at Shipwell. And happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Favorite food's always going to fall for pizza for me. So that's about it.
I love it. I love it. Well, great. So good to have you here. I'm going to pass it over to Kara now. Kara, introduce yourself and we'll do the same question.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Kara Cedrone. I run go-to-market operations for Maxwell. I think favorite food right now is seafood. I'll go with sushi and mussels because 'tis the season.
Very much in the season, and that is going to be in season for me for a while, at least for the rest of the summer. So I'm right there with you. I love it. And last but certainly not least, Shawn, bring us home. A little bit about you and especially your favorite food.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for everybody taking the time. Great to talk with everybody. My name is Shawn Killpack. I'm VP of Revenue Strategy at TalkDesk. I'm based out of the great state of Utah. Not a ton of people there, but we actually have a pretty good tech community. And my favorite food, anything meat and potatoes, but I'd say we love smoking meat, and smoked brisket is pretty hard to beat.
So. I love that. I was actually smoking some pork shoulder last weekend, and I'm debating on what I'm going to be doing this weekend. So I'm right there with you. I obviously won't leave y'all hanging. Again, great to see everybody here. For those that I haven't met, my name is Brad, co-founder of Sonar and Wizards of Ops, which is a collaboration of what we're doing here today, talking all things operations with some of these rock stars. Again, won't leave you hanging on the food. I'm going to go with sushi as well. It's just something that I could probably, if you had that one goofy question, if you had to eat one thing the rest of your life, what would you eat? I'm pretty sure I could survive pretty well with just living off sushi. So love some good sushi. We have a lot to go over today and a fair amount of time to do it. Again, for everybody in the chat, please jump in, ask questions. We'd love to hear from you. Even feel free to toss your name in there, where you're dialing in from, and your favorite food. But we will get things moving. The whole premise of today, and we ran this campaign earlier about how to really recognize some of the biggest ops all-stars out there in the land. The folks that we have on this call today are the winners of that. So first and most importantly, Kara, Stephanie, Shawn, congratulations. Y'all have been recognized mainly by your peers and by your managers for being a rock star in operations. So what we want to do today is learn a little bit more about your background, how you got into operations, some of the key moments where you found like these catalyst moments like, hey, this one event or this one mentor or this one person I've worked with really elevated me from point A to point B on this journey. As always, we like to be wildly empathetic. I can already see the entire list of people that are in here so far. A lot of folks I personally know, we've all been through some ups and downs. We've stubbed our toe a few times, we've broken things here and there. So we'll show a little bit of empathy along the way and kind of share a few of our own war stories. And last but not least, some really good advice for especially people that are starting in their ops career. They might be in that rookie season as we all have been there before. And we want to shed some really good advice for them as well. First and most importantly, though, we want to make sure that if you're not already in WizOps, please join our community. I know we put these webinars on all through LinkedIn, but a lot of folks, believe it or not, aren't already in our community. So I just dropped the link in there. You can click it on the screen or you can see it in the chat. But please join our community. We'd love to have you in there. And it's exactly how you get to jump up on stage like this sometimes with some other great ops rock stars. But to kick things really off, I want to make sure we get a quick icebreaker in. How in the world did you even get into operations? I love asking this question. And Stephanie, I'm going to start with you and Kara and then Shawn. But this is a tough one because you can ask this to a software engineer. Hey, how did you get into this? Well, I studied computer science in undergrad and then I got a job in engineering because that's where you start with that sort of route. Operations isn't really as straightforward. There's not many RevOps associated degrees out there. There's a handful of really good certifications we can all get in Salesforce and other applications, but I always like to understand, how did you even get in here? So again, Stephanie, I'm going to start with you, then Kara, and then Shawn. The quick background of how you even got into operations.
Sure. All right. So I spent a large part of my early career in the construction and enterprise manufacturing type industries. And I'll say technology literacy, it was lagging significantly, to put it politely. But in those roles, I decided to embrace that wizard title, one of my favorite nicknames in the world. I decided to embrace it, and I ended up moving my focus from computer printer wizard to a more system process focus for my contributions, my training, education, all the things. So I spent a good amount of time in outward and inward facing roles. Definitely found that inward facing I preferred. Customer facing was not my favorite. So I found a niche. For my budding skill set when I was introduced to Salesforce and Infor M3. That's a manufacturing ERP system. And the larger company I worked for at the time, they were implementing Salesforce. Trailhead was released, I want to say 2014, a little bit after that. So not quite having Trailhead as a resource. And with that implementation, I found I had a knack for solving problems, for figuring out how anything could work, particularly in this shiny new system and the systems that it connected to. So it was very exciting. So seeing an ERP and a CRM system talk to each other, connect like that, it expanded my understanding of how a company could run. And so we're talking 2013, 2014. So that was new. That was exciting for me to see in action for the very first time. And I saw incredible potential in those tools. I knew I wanted to be at the center of that, most definitely. So my team at the time was more than happy to let me run with it, and so I did, and I never stopped. So with RevOps, it lets me make real contributions through the data, through the processes, tech stack. It's a dream role for me, so I found it to be perfect for what I was after.
I love it. It's always interesting hearing like that starting point and really understanding like kind of the meandering route to get there, because there's no direct line. And just kind of understanding too. Like it's funny starting on the printer side, I say like on the hardware side and moving more into the software side. And I can only imagine what that looked like in 2013, 2014, because it's changed drastically a decade later now. So I love it. Kara, I'll pass it over to you as well. How your quick story on how you got into operations.
Yeah, agreed. None of us really dreamed of becoming ops one day, I don't think, in our childhood. But for me, I started my first job out of college in a support role. So I had been there a bit. It was wealth management. We were still binding books for presentations, if anyone knows what that is. There was a homegrown CRM that was built in the CEO's attic in his hometown at one point back in the 90s. It was very antiquated. And so after a few years, I was running the admin support team for the sales executive team. And one of the partners calls me up that I was supporting, and he goes, "Your sales operations. We need to grow this muscle of the business." He was living in Palo Alto, so very, forward thinking, innovative. And so I hopped off the phone, Googled sales operations, figured out what it was, and he helped me put a business plan together. So we migrated the team over to Salesforce to replace that CRM, if you could even call it that, pivoted the focus of the team mostly just to be more of a revenue case management team. And they were essentially helping run the pipeline. And so at that point, I had no idea how much he was helping influence my focus for the career.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, I love that. That's it's like I said, not to be a broken record, but it's just always an interesting route to know that it doesn't necessarily have to start in operations. You can start in a myriad of different places, but you're going to find your sweet spot there. I love it. Shawn, bring us home a little bit about how you got into ops.
Yeah, those are great stories to follow. It's interesting because for being somebody who likes to plan and everything as much as I do, I feel like my career has not been planned. I never would have guessed that would be here. Didn't even know this role existed a couple of years ago. So I started out in the military, and I was an engineer in the military. And so I had my whole career path planned. We ended up with some family changes that we decided we wanted to kind of put down roots for the kids. So changed my career path then, and I had to go figure out what I wanted to do, and I had no clue. And started looking at all the options of what it could be. I landed at a company called Qualtrics and landed on the implementation team, and only got there due to connections and friends, and got to learn a little bit. And as I got in, I realized I wanted to be just a touch closer to revenue. And so luckily I had a lunch with somebody who's become a very close friend. And he's like, hey, I'm hiring for my team. And it happened to be just at an overlap of an intersection of my strength. And because it was a lot of the data migration and data connections. And I was like, okay, I have no clue what sales ops is, but like, I think I can do this, and this gets me closer to revenue. And so I took that first step. And then it was just finding ways to tie my strengths to get closer to that, and got close with sales leaders, found out I really loved being close with the sales leaders because they just think so much differently than I do. Like the engineer side of me versus sales leaders just have such a fun personality, and they go after things in such a different way. Their strengths and like just different than me. And so I love working close with them to learn and do all of that. And it's been a fun ride, just trying to find ways to get close to revenue, but still stay within my strengths. And that was kind of a weird path to get there, but it's been a really fun way to do it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah. Like I said, there's actually been a few folks that I've heard started in the military side of things and kind of, like I said, found their way through operations that I know as well. I wish I could say I've got a really fun and cool story. The biggest one that I had, I started off in sales, and I quickly found out I was tragically bad at it. I was good at the social part of it, but all the other aspects I was terrible at. I also just love to talk to people. So when I was actually started off in recruiting, like technical recruiting, which is a form of like kind of SDR world. And I remember one day here in Atlanta, the Weather Channel has their headquarters here. And I remember at the time I was looking for a software engineer and picked up the phone, 100 cold calls a day. And I call this guy and he picks up and we start talking. I was like, well, what would you say your biggest accomplishment was? Like, well, I started the Weather Channel mobile app, for the iPhone. I was like, no way. Tell me more. I was on the phone with this guy for like 45 minutes, just hearing his whole backstory of how he started the Weather Channel app. But at the very end of that call, I hung up with him. My boss was like, I hope you placed him somewhere, because that was a long interview call. I was like, oh, no, he's not qualified for the role at all. But man, this guy started the Weather Channel app. And so I quickly realized, yes, I love talking, but I love actually working more on the technology side than anything else. And so I attributed a little bit of it to that guy, kind of getting my wheels turning about how to get into tech. So all that to be said, want to dive one layer deeper. So now that we know how we all got into this, really want to start thinking about some of those catalyst moments that propelled you from that first entry point into ops to really where you are today. Like I said earlier, I know I've heard a little bit of y'all stories already, but some of them involve really good leaders. Some of them involve going through different companies and different roles. But I would love to hear it. I'm actually going to start with who do we want to start with this time? I'm going to go with Kara first, and then we'll go Shawn, then Stephanie. We'll let you bring us home. How about that?
Yeah.
Cool. Take it away, Kara.
I would say one example is at my first startup. There were various shakeups, and they led to a few significant sales leadership changes. So at one point, it was myself and the CEO running the sales team, and so it really propelled me. You can imagine what that looked like. So it gave me kind of an aha moment on the breadth of impact that the role of this operations function can have in an organization. I think, you know, if you're receiving feedback, it's from the sales team for what they need, it's from the CS team for what they need, et cetera. And it's really up to us to influence the organization on all of the power that we can have and the role we can play to really centralize. And so I got that vision. I was able to lead with the go-to-market strategy and just began taking a more firm approach when I had an idea to support the strategy, and then enforcing realistic and productive expectations of our sales team to kind of advocate for them at a time that they didn't have advocacy. And so it gave me an opportunity to see myself stretch in that different way and maintain a culture of partnership with your reps. And in those sticky moments is really where I think everyone kind of comes out so much better on the other side.
Totally. There's nothing better, especially just knowing all the stories from the three of you, but also just even seeing some of the names of the folks that are on the call today. I've had a lot of those same conversations. And I think one of the coolest things and the coolest opportunity that you get in operations is to really build that rapport with folks and really be able to create that support system, especially for go-to-market folks. Like I said earlier, sales is tough. All of our jobs are tough, but when you don't have that camaraderie and that support from your counterparts, it can be extremely tough. So that's fantastic. Shawn, curious with you too as well. The catalyst moment that really propelled you from rookie to all-star.
Yeah. So I would say one of the things that we talk about, like shifting into RevOps, that I would made it to where I actually love what I'm doing and getting kind of a deeper, okay, I have a sense and a purpose in my job. Because to me, like the money and everything else, I know a lot of people are just like, hey, I want to go after this. I wanted to have kind of more of a purpose. And one of the opportunities came up as we had this shift in dynamic of what was going on, which all of us have had through the last 3 years. Nobody can predict off of any of the other stuff. Ever since COVID, it's like there's just massive shift after massive shift, right? And so, and I would say one of the things that I was fortunate because I had just spent enough time with a lot of the data, and I think a lot of things that people don't recognize how much prep goes in behind it. You have to have all the data prepped, and then an opportunity comes, and now all this work you've gotten done, you can now go and act on it. And so I had been doing some of that, and there was a shift, and we were able to recognize with that shift using the data to say, hey, we need to shift these resources over here. And we were able to go and capture an opportunity really quickly because we had been prepped. We'd done all the other stuff beforehand. And now we shifted and captured an opportunity that we wouldn't have gotten if we hadn't acted really quick. And then I also, like, what that did is, okay, all these people who had these, or that we moved their resources, they wouldn't have been as successful if we weren't ready. And so to me, it was like, man, this is what's fun, is if I get really good at my job and I can spot out where there's going to be opportunity, how we're going to get these people up, all these people and their families get to have success because of what we're doing. And then it made it so much more fun. And it's like, okay, I'll spend the hours in the data getting ready so that way these people can go be successful.
I love it. It's one of those things too, and we talk a lot on this webinar and a lot of the circles that we're all in operations of how to measure our own success for the ops world. Mm-hmm. And being able to hear stories like that where you can actually measure the impact of helping the speed of your go-to-market team start to execute faster. We do so many different conversations about ROI and how to truly measure the success of RevOps, but that right there, the proof is in the pudding, is if you can get your team to really start amplifying that speed, that's one of the biggest ways that RevOps can make an impact on your businesses. And subsequently for your career, it can absolutely be what rockets you up to the next level. So that's fantastic. Last but certainly not least, Stephanie, I'll let you take us away with a catalyst moment that has helped you prepare or propel you into that next stage.
Similar to Kara, startup wave. Easily the most disruptive and educational experience of my professional life. I would say it took a lot out of me. I had a short-lived role in between here and Shipwell. Shipwell's definitely still in startup world. But at my previous life, okay, enterprise level, I almost had it easy. It's difficult in other ways, don't get me wrong, but processes already existed. Everyone knew what they had to do every single day. And while I saw plenty of positive results in my work for my team, it's an entirely different experience here at Shipwell, seeing my contributions directly influence my work success, just like you were speaking to. It's incredibly humbling, but thrilling to see all my hard work result in this growth and being a part of Shipwell's journey. Definitely. So, startup world.
Totally. Startup world for the win. We were joking about this actually at lunch. I had lunch with a couple of folks, like also in the startup world around here in Atlanta. And it's there's that old adage of like, yeah, 1 year feels like 10 years sometimes in that. And while the startup world can be a little arduous at times, a little tough to operate in, I'm a firm believer that the amount of experience that you get in that well exceeds the time you potentially can spend in it. So, better said, you can get 10 years worth of experience in about 18 months working in a fast paced, sometimes chaotic environment. But that's also kind of what helps propel you up to that next level. So, I love it. We're gonna keep rolling. We've got another question on here, and this one I'm really excited about. Again, we talk so much about our high level of empathy for not only other operations folks, but for the rest of like go-to-market teams. So, really curious. Shawn, we'll actually start with you and kind of keep rolling around the circle. We'll go Stephanie and Kara, let you bring us home. But what are some of the high and low moments in the career? The road to success certainly doesn't come without any bumps. So curious if any big learning lessons. Failures are welcomed. I fail every day and pretty proud of those failures most of the time. But really curious if there was a learning lesson that helped you kind of have a little bit of an aha moment that really helped you in your career as well.
Yeah. So I would say the high, we just touched on that a little bit. The high to me is anytime what you do and you feel a direct tie to like, okay, that made those people successful and we were able to go after that. So that's always the high to me. But also I'll spend a little bit more on the low because I think a lot of people, not enough people will share their stories. And it's like, man, I'm the only person who screwed this up when I think we all do it. So one of the times we were getting ready and we were gonna launch this new way that we were gonna do account planning. And so I had all this stuff prepped. We were moving probably a little too fast, and it's a bigger company. I mean, big-ish company, probably big for Stephanie's world, small for a lot of other people's world. But and so we had to communicate and coordinate with a lot of these people, and so we were getting it ready for our SKO. And I got a little bit ahead of my skis. I was trying to get everything going, and I started launching stuff out. I started like communicating to people. We started doing all this stuff, and it was with the premise that we had an agreed contract with this vendor. Everything was good. Sales rep comes back and tries to renegotiate a higher thing that would be outside of our budget. And as we're already launching and doing some of this stuff, I like lost sleep over it because I'm like, man, now we already just rolled this stuff out. Now we're not even going to sign this contract. It was just, I was terrified. I had to go kind of hand in hand to sales leader at the time and be like, hey, like I screwed up. We didn't have the signed contract. Like we had a verbal agreement between us. Like everything was locked, but now that it came back. And then I went to my procurement guy who was a close friend and he was like, okay, dude, we'll make this work. And we went through the low time. We set up all these contingency plans and everything else. Ends up like one being close with my procurement friend, what really helped because he bailed me out because he came in hard and was like, hey, this is not happening. And so and also helped me by recognizing and kind of being humble with the sales leader that he and I shared a like good moment is like, look, we're going to make this work. We're going to figure this out together. And so I think one of the big things that taught me was one, if you're a person who's going to get a lot of stuff done, you're going to have screw ups because you run fast and there's no way you can run fast by being perfect all the time. And so it's like you have to recognize you're going to screw up when you're running fast. Two is the relationships that come with that. Like people actually want you to come and talk to them and be vulnerable and like, hey, I screwed up. Like help me out with this, and people will jump in and help. You don't have to carry it on your own. And luckily it all worked out. It ended up being fantastic. But like during that time, it was just this gut of, oh man, I'm going to have to backtrack all this stuff that we just did. And it's going to be visible to everybody. Change management is my worst. I hate that part of my job. Like just getting everybody on board. It's just not there, but, everybody screws up and you're going to run fast and you're going to have screw ups, but you can get through it and it'll be just fine.
You're spot on. I think the one thing that I'd take away from that, I think this is I would call it like one of those pillars for just ops people in general, and it goes to your procurement friend and everybody else. The minute you raise your hand and, just show a little humility and say, hey, I need some help. I'm in this position. What do we need to do to make it better? Just the amount of people that are willing to raise their hand and say, I got you. Here's how I would think about it. Here's how I would help. I think that's one of the biggest things that we see out of our community day in and day out. If you spend any time at WizOps, you'll quickly see all the questions. I even asked a question there yesterday talking about integration users and how things are starting to get used there. So I'm going to be catching up with Aaron later on about that. So I even still use our own community to solve some of our own questions we have, which again, just goes back to that same thing you're talking about, Shawn, which is making sure that you've got those right folks in your corner that can really help you. And you know that you can raise your hand and get quick answers the right way. So I love it. Stephanie, I'm going to go to you and I'll let Kara bring us home. When you think about some of the highs and lows, what comes to mind?
My lowest point, we'll start there. So that would definitely be when I felt stuck in a position. And I'm sure we've all been there at some point or another. But in this position, no options for moving up, no way to expand my scope of responsibility in that role whatsoever. Again, very large company, but I was on site at a very, very small network branch. So the role I took on had a surprise added responsibility with that Salesforce implementation. So that was after corporate had announced that, provided about a week's worth of training to sales and management. And then, so onboarding was a battle in itself, especially while learning the system myself. So that was fun. The role covered efforts like that through to coordinating the annual golf event, making sure the office lease was renewed on time and toilet paper was in stock. There was a lot involved in that role, but no option to move up regardless of degree, training, certs. There just wasn't a position that wasn't out of state at corporate, unfortunately. Locally, there was just nowhere to go with that knowledge to expand that role. So that was a low time. That was a low time followed by a very short speck of time at my first startup that struggled heavily with the pandemic. That was a very short, sad experience. But then I found Shipwell. And Shipwell, they've supported my growth. They've provided me with exactly what I needed while I provide them solutions, and they've been able to use my skill set and provide opportunities to grow it. So it's been fantastic, and that leads right into my high moment. I would say it's right now. I've never spoken at an event like this. This is incredibly exciting for me.
Yeah.
And I will say the past year has been an incredible ride. I'm recovering from a severe head injury from last July, so we're coming up on a year of healing. I was in the ICU. I lost a couple weeks of work. I lost hearing in my right ear. But after going through that, all I've done is see my skill set expand, my confidence grow. And as intimidating as that feels, being here right now, I get to share this with all of you. So I get to share my journey. That's very exciting. It's very scary. But in an odd way, it's further fueled me to see where I can take things. So excited to be here.
Wow. That is absolutely incredible. And I don't know what happened just now, but the allergies somehow in Atlanta just got really bad. I'm not wiping my eyes or anything. No, seriously though, Stephanie, that's incredible. I'm obviously so glad that you've recovered the way you have, but what an incredible story to have such a traumatic happening in your life, but be able to find a way to have some good come out of it and launch you into your career the right way. So I'm very proud of you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Kara, I don't know how you follow that up, but I'm going to let you when you think about some of the highs and lows that you've also experienced. But yeah, I would love to know what comes to mind for you.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. That's an incredible story. Well, I'll start with the lows as well. I think my first job's an example. I stayed for 8 years. We were incredibly tight knit, small boutique firm. Everyone was working hard and fast. I'm lucky to have many connections from there still, but I had not experienced enough myself. I was managing a team of 5, just not contributing back to them what they needed from a management standpoint. And work-life balance was a concept that I did not even know. I burned out. I burnt out, and I
Oh,
stayed probably a little longer than I should have. I was exposed to so much of the business, and the loyalty can be to your detriment sometimes. And so for me, I was able to finally take a step back. I actually ended up leaving without a position lined up to really, look more holistically at what I was fueled by from a fulfillment standpoint, and you gain things from those experiences. So I feel like if you tie it back to the operations role, we tend to start in these cultures where we are doing a little of everything, sometimes doing it all, from our scope. And I think it's really important to try to get creative with your resources. Obviously from a system standpoint, automation, what can you do less of? What can you just kill that, is maybe a safety net task that you're just so used to doing, you think you need to. And so reevaluating your own business, your own roadmap is so important. And I think, it's important for me to continue to remind myself of that. It's not easy. And so that would be the low that I feel lucky to have had early on. And then I think the high is an example of where the work kind of showed the output. And so I joined my company after they had had a few years of big wins. And so you can imagine that forecasting and pipeline management were not necessarily prioritized at that time because everything was flowing. So I came in, we took a quarter or two to get it going, but we established a forecasting methodology. And, the win there was we got within 3% of the number that we predicted. And that felt great. And so, it's a tangible example of leveraging what work you're putting in and being able to really turn that into propelling the role of operations and your team to be that strategic arm of the business rather than just the tactical, systems hounding the team to do their work. You can really show them what the outcome is of it.
totally. I would be remiss, and I'm sure everybody on this podcast and webinar is thinking about the same way. We've probably all, like you were talking about a second ago, ridden that wave in the good times when pipelines are high and deals are closing and you're wearing the gong out in the office because you're closing so many deals. You're so pumped for your team. And then you see this little market thing shift a little bit and companies have to reorganize and pause and think differently about it. I think, and so many of the customers and folks in our communities that we've talked to that are in ops roles right now are feeling such a kind of a mixed bag of emotions, to be honest with you. Yes, that can be a low. We're in a low part of the market. I think objectively everybody can agree with that. But at the same time, while that might be low on the performance of a business or that demand's not high enough or conversion rates aren't working the best way or deal cycles are elongating, stop me if you've heard all these, as operations teams, there's a really high emphasis right now to make sure that, yes, we have all of our data aligned very, very well so we can know what adjustments we have to go make. If there's anything that we can do, should we pivot? Should we reprioritize? Is this segment not working well? Should we think about this segment instead? A lot of that sits on the fingertips of the folks that are right here on this stage and also in this call, because without having that type of analytics and that type of understanding of how our business is operating, we can't give guidance to our leadership teams to actually go and implement those changes. So it's been really interesting lately to hear some of the highs and lows of that, and that being a high and low in some of the market side of things right now. So it's so good. Well, we're going to keep cruising through. Kara, we're going to let you start with this one, so you get to have two of them back to back. There's a reason why the three of you are here. You, again, were nominated to be this ops rock star that has taken this journey from rookie to rock star. So, when you think about talk about your relationship with the person that nominated you here. When are they pulling you into conversations? How are they approaching them with you and asking budgets for tools, and what do those sort of conversations look like? Clearly, you've built a great rapport with someone to nominate you here, but curious how you communicate with that person, but also any guidance that you have to the greater audience here to communicate better with their leadership would be great. So Kara, I'll let you start.
Sure. I was nominated by my boss, who's our chief revenue officer, Mike Brower, and Mike and I have worked together at a couple companies. So we were together at my prior company where he was running sales, and then he brought me over to Maxwell as soon as he had budget to do so. And what's interesting is we have entirely opposite personalities. Maybe not that uncommon though. He's very much in the sales minded kind of CEO innovator. I have an idea, let's go run it. And then I'm trying to kind of build the pillars around the ideas and hold down the how we're going to accomplish it. And so it's a good partnership. And that's truly how he treats it. He has taught me a ton about authentic leadership, leading for your team, while also nudging you into growth moments. And the autonomy is consistent. And so that can be a really good challenge to hang on to, because it's important to, loop those leaders in with the right amount of detail and the right timing, but also flex a little bit and stretch your ability to run the decision making and all of the kind of strategic initiatives that your team is empowering. I think our working dynamic has been so effective because of transparency. You build a sense of trust up front with exactly what Shawn was talking about earlier, with admitting to what broke or, in anticipation of where something went wrong. And I think, with that, you start to have the ability to just rely on each other and do things async. And in a startup, that is crucial. And so, when asking for support, I have the right to really ask for wherever I think it will be strategically helpful to be involved in a conversation. There's nothing off the table and everything's open. So I'll get the no if that's appropriate, but it's always about what's more effective, which is priceless in a leader. When I'm asking for budget or resources, it's great too, because I was able to get buy-in internally, bring stakeholders together, and then ultimately put a proposal together to get a quoting tool when we didn't have spend. And it was because he let me advocate across the organization and just kind of drive those use cases forward to ultimately get our CFO's green light. So, it's just an example of where that partnership works.
Totally. I think one of the coolest things, and I see this so often with all the folks and customers and community members that we talk with, there's an art and a skill to being able to go and unlock budget. And it is not something that you can flippantly do and say like, hey boss, I need like 20K for this one thing. It's like, no, you have to go and prepare an ROI statement. You have to really show how this impacts the business. But it builds such great trust with your counterparts and with your boss that they know that you took that time to do that. And that the only reason you're even thinking about asking for it is that for the betterment for the company, not just for yourself. So I love that. Shawn, kind of thinking the same way. When you think about the person that nominated you, how are you communicating with them, approaching them, and some of the lessons you've learned?
Yeah, a lot of similar things to Kara. So I actually was with CRO as well. We've worked at a previous company. And I think one of the most interesting things, like I said, I love getting to work closely with salespeople just because of the different mindset. Like Kara said, they're opposites. And what I would say is my strengths are sometimes their weaknesses, and their strengths are definitely my weaknesses. So that combination actually helps to where it's like I recognize where I'm going to be good and I can fill gaps for them, and recognize where I'm going to be weak and what they're really good at, and like, hey, you go do this part. And I think that's what's really fun is when you find a partnership of somebody that you can talk and be open with that. I think one of the other things that's interesting about that relationship is when I was starting out in operations, it was kind of hesitant to bring up like, well, I think this is wrong, or I think this is here. And the key thing when you're an operations leader is like, you should know this part better than anybody in the company. Like, you should know this data, you should know this pipeline, you should know this at a deeper level they know it in a different way. They know the relationship side. They know that what the deal feels like, and you know it from the data side. And so as far as like what that relationship looks like, it took me a while to get comfortable with, no, that's why I'm here, is I'm going to point out stuff that like we can go back and forth and we can talk about this and debate. Where I think a lot of times when people look at somebody who's in a position, they're like, oh, well, they've already got this figured out. They don't want me to tell them that they're wrong or whatever else. That's why they want you there. They want somebody that's going to stand up and tell you that, hey, like, I actually think you're wrong and here's why. And we can talk and back and forth about it. And so when it comes to like asking for budget, asking for all that stuff, I would say the way that we operate is we come up with kind of the core tenets of what we're trying to do. What are our key objectives? And then what falls inside of that? Like we both kind of go and operate in our space and have a team that they all operate in their space. We can move a lot faster that way. And so having to where everybody can go after the same goals and talk through those things and come back and challenge each other. Because at the end of the day, everybody has different strengths, and by everybody bringing those strengths to the table, you make the best decisions.
Completely agree. I think the one thing that sticks out, and then we're going to jump over to Stephanie to hear hers as well, is I think one of the biggest differentiators that makes a good ops person different from a great ops person is genuinely understanding the business. So when you're able to take some of that constructive feedback all the way down to, hey, here's some of the feedback we're getting about our product, here's how it's working, here are some of the strategies I think we can go and take to do that. That is, in my opinion, what separates good from great, because I was actually having a conversation with somebody recently. They're like, well, yeah, I'm looking for a new ops job. Don't really care about the industry or what type of product we're selling. Like, I never really get really involved with that anyway. I just kind of help keep Salesforce lights on and the system wheels spinning. I was like, man, you'd be just so much more valuable to your business if you just took a little bit of time, go hang out with a product manager for a little bit, or the sales team for that matter, or the marketing team. Like, find out more about what the business is doing, what the product or what the service is offering. You will just be such a better operations person because you can actually provide critical insight that way, not just, hey, that validation rule is breaking and the rep's not putting in the data the right way. Helpful, kind of, but not as helpful as the strategic thinking of it. So I completely agree.
Fully echo that. I think it actually, you should be, I try and make everybody go on customer, like you should go try and be on customer calls.
Yes.
And you should go, one of the most valuable things to me is sitting and watching sales reps do their job. And just, hey, I need you to close out this opportunity. Sit and watch them. You learn there's 20 different validations of required fields that pop up that they have to do. And so all this data that we're making decisions off of, it's actually junk because they're just clicking through it. And so a lot of times, people, like if you try and stay too far in the background and you're not out with salespeople, out in the customers, or if you like, sometimes the data doesn't stand out because you don't know the context of it and you can't make as much decisions. So I can't agree with you more that you need to get out and sit with customers and sit with salespeople from the operations side.
Ride-alongs are the best thing you could ever do as an ops person, and volunteer to do it. Don't wait until somebody asks you to do it. Say, hey, can I go jump on that customer call with you? That'd be great. Stephanie, I know we're getting close on time, but love to hear where you are with the person that nominated you, and especially how that relationship and conversations go.
Sure. My CMO, direct supervisor, Karen Sage, nominated me. She's definitely been a catalyst for my role with RevOps and with Shipwell to boot. We have very candid conversations. I can say that right off the bat. When I met Karen, I was a sales analyst here at Shipwell, and she immediately saw that the role was bleeding into every other business unit tied to the systems that I was managing. So interesting note, I did still sit on the marketing team. We were growing really quickly, restructuring, and I was a sales analyst on the marketing team. So as fun as that was, I carved out a niche for a more sales marketing ops type role, regardless of that title. But she called that out immediately as soon as she walked in, that I'm not a sales analyst. I was providing revenue operations support, and that's been my role for the past year at Shipwell. We have a very productive relationship. She's incredibly supportive of my growth. We have biweekly one-on-ones, daily Slack, constantly communicating. I do get pulled into executive requests for analytics or system questions. I do get pulled into team level discussions as well. budget and tooling. So everybody loves those combos. We've worked very closely on that since she came to Shipwell. We were a bit bloated. With the help of our team, we've successfully revamped our entire marketing tech stack. It's been amazing, and we lowered our renewal costs significantly. I will say Karen, incredibly intimidating negotiator. She's able to achieve renewal costs that blew my attempts pure out of the water. So I'm very grateful she's on our team.
I love it. I love it. I will say that is something that we're hearing more and more. All of our customers, just everybody in the community, everybody just in this type of market is going through some of those pieces of it as far as analyzing your tech stack. The one thing that I will absolutely call out there, and I'm sure everyone here will agree, there's no better feeling in the ops world than getting that request from some of the executive team, like, hey, we've got our board meeting coming up in about 3 weeks. Here are some of the critical data that we need. Can you help us put some of those graphs together, some of the different data reporting? And yes, we're all good at the let's create the fun graphs up and to the right and get all of our data reports. But being able to answer the why to executives when they ask that is just such a fulfilling piece. We talk internally here at Sonar all the time, like, what's your dopamine hit and how are you going to find that every single day? Sometimes it's on the sales side and you're banging the gong. Sometimes it's on the ops side and you are getting that critical information over to stakeholders and they're able to make massive business decisions that actually have big outcomes for the business. So I absolutely love to hear that. We're going to jump over to Q&A real quick, and then we'll probably have time for one more quick parting word, which I've already kind of given everybody a heads up on what they're going to get asked. But my good friend Mike Goy jumping in and asking a question. So for anyone who was in an ops role prior to COVID, is working remotely a blessing or a curse? Quite the polarizing question there, Mike. I actually had the pleasure of hanging out with Mike recently when I was up in New York, but I'm going to let Shawn jump in there. What do you think about pros and cons?
I would say it is a blessing and a curse. Absolutely. I love getting to work remotely because you get to be more efficient. I get to spend more time with my family, all the blessings of being remote. The biggest curse to me is everything's become so much more tactical and you lose a lot of creativity. I think there's just an energy and a buzz being in person, and there's just some cool ideas that come out when you're sitting next to each other. There's just some fun things that happen. And so how you can find a mix of both of those, I think every company's trying to figure that piece out. I think there's absolutely better ways of being productive at home, but I think there's just something missed by being in person and sitting at lunch together or sitting and chatting with each other. And so finding ways to find the combination of those is the challenge that we have.
Totally. I completely agree. Blessing and curse. Kara, Stephanie, any thoughts on remote blessings and or curse?
It's largely a blessing. I was just starting to do a few work remote days in the early days of 2020. And it was just to stay afloat and get that heads down time. However, there is an element of context that is only available from your sales team by sitting near them in an office because they talk with people all day long, and the last people that they necessarily think to talk to unless they have to because something is broken or needs support or clarification is their ops team. And so I just gained so much by being in the office with them. And I do certainly miss that. It's the last day of the quarter, next Friday. We used to make that, a whole ritual. So it's those little things that I certainly miss.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. There's some blessings, curse. I'll share my insights at the end. But Stephanie, any thoughts too on blessings and curses of remote work as an ops role?
It's been a pure blessing for me. I found myself well suited to this environment.
Yeah, very good. Very good. I think I'll reflect back on what Shawn said. I completely agree. Can you sort of keep blinders on a little bit more and stay focused and really spend that like heads down time? Absolutely. I think on the flip side of that too, kind of echoing what Kara mentioned, was there's so much that you can benefit from just being omnipresent around other folks and hearing just different conversations and being able to quickly get dragged in real fast of like, hey, you were talking to that customer and you said X, curious why you said that, or I've never used that line. And maybe I should think about it. So there's just, even from an ops perspective, you can pick up on so many ways you can help your customers. By customers, I mean our internal customers, our end users, with some of the pain points they have. So I think the one interesting thing we're seeing right now, just in our greater tech ecosystem and just in business ecosystems in general, I think everybody's trying to find the balance for that. We actually just got back into the office on a more regular basis, and we're in here Tuesday through Thursday. So we still have the flex of Monday and Friday, so you kind of be remote. And we're really trying to be intentional about ours. So when we have our one-on-ones, let's do those in person. Like you said, let's sit around the lunch table. Let's go have happy hours afterwards and grab a beer. There's a lot of camaraderie and rapport that gets built in person that's a little tougher remotely, but not impossible. I think that's one of the other cool, innovative things right now that's happening. There's so many new ways for us to build this type of relationship. You can do it in the communities that we have, things like WizOps. We can do it in different other forums when it comes to things like this, webinars. There are people that will meet each other on this webinar that they will now go and have friendships with. And so I think there's just a good balance that everybody's thinking. So we'll see where it all starts to unfold and how things start to go. But the very last thing I'll ask you all before we head out, and again, before I even ask this, thank y'all so much for spending time. I know it's been close to an hour now that we've carved out for this, and hopefully everybody, especially that has joined and will watch the webinar recording, will really get benefits from it. But the very last thing that we always like to ask is, when you start to think about that early part of your career and where you were and what advice you were giving, expert advice. We'll go a quick little round table on it and just get everybody's quick thoughts. Kara, I'll start with you. Stephanie will go second, and then we will bring it home with you, Shawn. So expert advice, if you were to rewind the clock, fire up the DeLorean and go back to the very start of your ops career, what advice would you give yourself? And subsequently, anybody that's obviously early in their revenue journey or their RevOps journey, what advice would you give them now?
Yep. I would say that, you need to focus on leveling up the strategic arm, because there's so much that you can get pulled into tactically. And so putting all of the prioritization and everything aside, that's absolutely clutch. Just remember that as you build that strategic advisor role and muscle, everyone, including your leaders, are just people with strengths and weaknesses as well. And leading with how you can help them, thinking about their day job, learning about their pain points. You are treating them as customers, like you said, Brad. It's absolutely important that the relationships help kind of drive that context and effectiveness.
Completely agree. Absolutely love that. Stephanie, what do you think?
I would say don't stop learning. Be curious, be proactive. I would not be here if I hadn't continued expanding my skill set, adding my value, adding to that value. If I don't understand how something works, I figure it out, and that has worked out really well for me.
Never stop learning. I absolutely love that. That's the full intent of this webinar too, is to help everybody continue to learn. Shawn, I'll let you bring us home. Expert advice.
Yeah, so I think one of the hardest things is be patient and go deep in your skills. I think everybody early on wants to get their hands in every pot and be involved in everything. Pick something and be the expert in that and go deep. It's the only time in your career you're going to get to, because eventually you're going to get pulled in all directions and you're going to be involved in everything. And if you haven't gone deep, how are you going to manage somebody that you now need to go deep? And how are you going to coach them through? Like, if you haven't done I spent 10 hours on this and got stuck on it, how are you going to coach them through it? Because you can't do it later in your career. Be patient enough to go deep, be an expert on something, and then go broad. Like, don't go broad too early.
Totally. You got to find that expertise level. And again, I'm looking right through the Zoom lens here of three really big experts in the ops space, and that's fantastic advice. The one thing I always say, and I tell folks all the time, this actually one of my interview questions when I interview candidates, embrace the three words, I don't know. You're going to find yourself saying it often, and it's perfectly fine that you don't know the answer to everything. Seek that expertise, exactly what Shawn was just saying. Go be the expert in something and get that depth of it. But at the rapid pace of innovation that everything is changing in right now, it's kind of impossible to be absolutely the expert of all things. And so when I tell folks all the time, especially even again, when I'm interviewing folks, if they can embody those words, I don't know. Typically, the next set of words that come out of their mouth are, but here's how I would go and find that answer. Or let me go get into my community, or let me talk to my mentor, or let me talk to an advisor who might know that answer. And so it just helps understand somebody's creativity more. And that, again, we all have to have a big bite of humble pie. We've talked about some of our failures earlier and even some of our successes, but embracing those three words really means a lot to me. And so if anybody ever interviews with Sonar later on, you'll be able to know that's a really good interview question. But embrace that, and then seek that guidance, seek the expertise, find a good community to be in, and really surround yourself with really smart folks. So, and just like that, we are right at the edge of time now. So I know we've got a few minutes left. Mike, thank you again for putting the question in. We'll let everybody get a few minutes back to their day. But most importantly, Shawn, Kara, Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us. And again, congrats on being nominated by your bosses for being an Ops rock star. Can't thank you enough. So,
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
of course. Thank you all. We will talk to you all soon. Have a great rest of your week. Stay tuned for more episodes coming up early next month. But we'll talk to everyone soon. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.